What is an interesting historical fact that barely anyone knows? The Persian Empire of the 6th century had a very awesome way of determining how many soldiers were lost in a campaign. They would all pass before the emperor and place a single arrow into a basket. The arrows would be counted and the baskets sealed until the troops returned from the campaign. When the soldiers returned, they would all take one arrow from the baskets. When the last soldier took an arrow, they would count the remaining arrows so they'd know how many men were lost. The number of aircraft destroyed during WWII is greater than the number of aircraft that currently exist in the entire world today. I think he's right. Agree to the Telegraph, there are around 40,000 commercial planes. Even if you had the non-commercial planes, it's still inferior to the loss of 300,000 planes during the WW2. Edit. Grammar. I don't know my irregular verbs. John O'Neill worked for the FBI pursuing Al-Qaeda, trying to convince higher-ups to take the threat more seriously. He was eventually pushed into early retirement because his personality clashed with FBI leadership. And he went on to head security in the World Trade Towers, where he was held 1 month later in the 9/11 attacks. Edit. I highly recommend watching The Looming Tower. During the Cold War, Denmark had an interesting way to catch spies. They'd ask you to pronounce Rødtmedfjeld, which is a well-known dessert in Denmark. But it's hard to pronounce if you're not Danish, which made spies easy to catch. Try listening to it on Google Translate. Edit. Wow. I typed this before going to bed yesterday, and I woke up with 20k upvotes and a Reddit gold. Wow. Thanks, Abbott. Romans really loved their dogs. So much so that people made graves for them. Some of the writings on the grave said things like, "I am in tears while carrying you to your last resting place, as much as I rejoiced when bringing you home in my own hands 15 years ago. I found it interesting and very sad." Rhode Island declared independence from Britain on the 4th of May, 1776. A 2 full months before the rest of the colonies, and were promptly forgotten about. I love en masse, and every time I meet someone from RI I realize I've completely forgotten it exists. Albert Einstein was offered the role of becoming Israel's second president in 1952, but declined the offer. Worth noting that President of Israel is more like Queen of England than President of the US. They have a prime minister, who is elected and runs the government. It's not like they were just, "Hey, that Einstein guy is pretty smart. Let's let him run Israel." Well, more archaeological than historical. But this is the internet and you can't stop me. The Hagia Sophia, one of the most beautiful buildings in the world, has some odd scratches inside. For hundreds of years, no one knew what they were, so they left them. It was eventually discovered that they are Futhark runes. Some Norseman far from home, possibly a member of the Varangian Guard, left a message for us, successfully screaming it across 1,000 years by carving it into the one building he knew would never be knocked down. Hafton was here. Johnny Cash was in the Air Force in 1953, intercepting and translating radio signals from the Soviet Union. He was the first American to learn of Joseph Stalin's death. An American lawyer invaded Nicaragua in 1856 and ruled for just under a year until the neighboring countries teamed up and kicked him out. The best part is that he wasn't finished after that. He tried starting other Confederate slave republics in Central America. Winston Churchill ordered an attack on the French Navy to prevent its ships from falling into North Sea hands. The French Navy was considered one of the most modern of the world and a real threat to the British Navy. That's a real forgotten historical fact. Narrator. Had the Germans come by sea, the French would have triumphed. Unfortunately, the Germans had tanks. Lots of tanks. The first exoplanet, planet beyond our solar system, was only discovered in the 1990s. I remember all those Time Kids magazines and stuff. Is Planet X real? Evidence of a new planet. One of the survivors of the sinking of Titanic, Violet Jessup, also survived the bombing of its sister ship Britannic and the ramming of its other sister ship Olympic. She's the only survivor of a disaster on all 3 Olympic-class ocean liners. She lived to be 83. She was the real unsinkable. You'd think she would stop going on ships after the second time or something. During the sinking of Britannic, she used her experience from Titanic to tell the other nurses to put their life belts on under their coats, so that if they ended up in the water and needed to ditch their coats they could. The Battle of Suraguri. In 1897 India, 21 Sikh soldiers in an outpost were confronted by 10,000 Pashtun soldier army. The 21 Sikh held off the army for over 7 hours and killed over 600 before losing the post and their lives. Held off long enough for word to get back home and an army to militarize and come recapture the post. Only time in British military history that all men involved in a battle were awarded the highest medal available to them. The Romans had a lot of festivals, and there was this special one which only women were allowed to attend. Men attending witnessing the festival in any way, or even saying the name of the goddess, was a crime. One nobleman named Clodius Pulcher decided he wanted to seduce the woman hosting the festival, and sneaked in disguised as a woman. Apparently, a slave girl started chatting with him, and when he responded, the slave freaked out because of the deep voice, and got him arrested. He stood trial on pain of death, but won, mainly with bribery. This same dude was accused of incest with his sister. Got himself adopted, at age 34, into the lower class just so he could run for an office. Got Cicero exiled from Rome, and was an all-around mad lad. Gotta love the late Republic. Benjamin Franklin was such a proponent to enemas that he had them several times a day, but only to be administered by young female attendants. The American military has not made a single Purple Heart medal since WW2. The reason being they made a lot in preparation for a ground invasion of Japan. Incorrect. While the US has not yet issued all the Purple Hearts made for the invasion of Japan, at one point a ton of them got administratively lost. So the US made some more because we were running out. Then they found them again. A suffragette tried to blow up Robert Burns' birthplace. Up until 1966. There used to be a type of coach that would get uncoupled from a train while the train was in motion and use its brake to stop at a station. This was to allow express trains to carry passengers destined for smaller stops without stopping. A sneer the anti-Caesarians used against Julius Caesar was that he was a bottom. It certainly wasn't a smear to say a Roman nobleman that men. It was not only accepted but expected. But being a bottom was seen as immoral and subservient to lesser. Abraham Lincoln was a champion wrestler, with only one loss in his career. There was a bear, Corporal Whiteegg, in Polish military during the Second World War. He was good to people but would take part in actions, like carrying ammunition and such. He smoked, ate cigarettes and drank vodka. After the war he was kept in a zoo and his old companions would go into his habitat and wrestle hug with him. He is an actual idol in Poland. The ancient Assyrians were absolutely brutal in their dealings with subservient nations as they were building their empire, to the point where the Persians, especially Cyrus the Great, banked on the fact that they weren't as terrible and much more lenient than the Assyrians. The USA and Canada provided the Anglo-American loan, with interest, in 1946 to help the UK rebuild after WW2. It was only finally repaid in 2006. Germany only finished paying reparations for WW1 in 2010. There are still ongoing negotiations and debate regarding Germany's WW2 reparations. In 1910 they tried to get approval to import hippos into Louisiana and set them free in the bayous to help with an invasive plant species problem and to provide a source of meat during a national shortage. In another fun twist, the bill was lobbied by two spies who were supposed to assassinate each other. I think people in Louisiana dodged a bullet. Just imagine invasive hippos. The deadliest animals in Africa. Rampaging around the state. Also, could you please give more info about this spy vs spy thing? Sounds like a fascinating story. Charlie Chaplin outlived Elvis Presley. So what? I've outlived both of them.